that we're focusing on for our tasting. But what you need to know about me is I've been with Brooks for 6 years now, and I'm the director of business development and education. And I fell into wine because I was a public school teacher for 10 years, and teachers drink a lot of wine. So that's how I ended up here.
Yes, we
Just
do.
curious. Vanessa, are you a teacher?
Yes.
You know then. Yep.
Yeah.
I just started taking classes on the side after teaching classes just because I thought wine was interesting. I was fascinated by the science behind it, and the elegance behind it. And before I knew it, I was a certified executive sommelier through the International Wine and Spirits Guild. I'm also a certified specialist of wine through the Society of Wine Educators in the UK. But what that means to me is I love to study about wine. I'll never know everything about it. But what I do learn, I love to share. So that's why we're here today. All right. So let's see. I'm going to share my screen with you. This is your official welcome. Also, keep in mind, I love interruptions and questions. So if you do have a question or you want to, interject with a comment or your personal experiences, by all means do it. I doesn't bother me, doesn't throw me off. The more participation we can get going today, the better. So don't hesitate to do that. In the meantime, though, I ask that you mute yourself so that any background noise within your environment right now doesn't interrupt what other people are listening to. All right. And I can't, for some reason, I can't keep an eye on the chat while I'm presenting. So by all means, just unmute yourself and ask me whatever you want to ask me. Not a problem. All right. So what I like to do whenever I start a tasting, especially a virtual tasting, is to start with a toast. So get your three wines out. I am going to have you start with one specific wine. I want you to put in your glass first the 2019 Brooks Estate Riesling. And we're going to have a toast with this wine. I want to encourage you to leave some of your wine in for each of the three wines today because I'm going to have you jump back and forth towards the end of the tasting for a little experiment. So be cognizant of how much you have remaining towards the end of the tasting. So let's toast for two reasons. One, I think it's really important that we bring attention to the fact that you all came together to do this. You're all over the country. I'm not near any of you. And we still found time to come together to learn, to explore a passion of ours, profession of some of ours. And it's evening time for a lot of you on the East Coast, and you've still found time to be with us. So I like to acknowledge that. And the other reason I like to start with the toast is it gives you permission to start tasting, and you don't have to wait for me. So cheers.
Cheers.
I know my picture is a picture of Pinot Noir, and we're toasting with Riesling today. But what's the best toast picture I have? As you're tasting that first sip of Riesling, I want you to be paying attention to how much you are salivating under your tongue. Riesling is exceptionally high in natural acidity. And because of that, your neutral pH level in your mouth gets thrown off very quickly, and your mouth reacts very quickly with flooding the space with saliva. That's really amazing for food pairing. So wine buyers, chefs, sommeliers, they love Riesling because of that acid. It's going to help cleanse and refresh the palate. That extra saliva helps distribute flavors both from food and wine all over the palate. So pay attention to that as we taste through today, but that first sip should have been really noticeable. All right. We have some people in here that are really far along in their wine profession. We have a couple people here that are maybe a little bit more novice. So I'm going to repeat a couple things that you might already know. So forgive me for being redundant, but to understand Riesling, you really have to start at the beginning. And that's with sweetness level. And when we talk about sweetness in wine, we talk about something called residual sugar. And to start at the basics, you have to start with fermentation to understand residual sugar. So fermentation is a chemical process. My background is in microbiology and chemistry, so I love this nerdy stuff. Fermentation is a molecule of yeast, molecule of sugar that then produce a molecule of alcohol in that wine and a molecule of carbon dioxide gas, which then goes off into the air during fermentation. Unless you're making sparkling wine in the traditional champagne method, then those bubbles become submerged in the liquid, that carbon dioxide. That's where the bubbles come from. Now, if you stop your fermentation early, either naturally or you force it to stop with sulfur or with cold temperatures, you're forcing the yeast to die off and stop eating the sugar. So there's going to be remaining sugar in that grape juice, and we call that remaining sugar residual sugar. Residual sugar is important when we talk about wine, especially when we talk about Riesling and other aromatic whites that tend to be produced sweet, such as Gewürztraminer and Muscat, because residual sugar is going to add both sweetness and body to the wine. Sweetness is easy for us all to wrap our brains around. We're in positions where we're eating sweetness, foods with various sweetness levels all day long. We understand that one really well. But for some of the novice wine tasters in the group, when you're identifying the body of a wine, I want you to think about how heavy the wine is in your mouth, the weightiness of it. And an example for that is milk. When you're tasting non-fat milk, whole milk, and cream, those milks will feel heavier or lighter in your mouth depending on their body. So that's the same type of idea that we think about when we're tasting wine. Lower sugar content, lower residual sugar content wines will have lighter body. There are other factors that play into body, but the more sugar content, like a dessert wine, it's going to have a heavier body. It'll be more full bodied. But there's a catch. When you're working with Riesling, a lot of times people will look at the back of the label and they'll talk about alcohol percentages to determine if it's a sweet wine or a dry wine, so not sweet. And then a lot of us wine nerds and wine professionals, we talk about the RS levels, the residual sugar levels. But when you're working with Riesling, you cannot reliably work with RS and alcohol when you're talking about how sweet a Riesling will be perceived on the palate. And the reason for that is that acid that I talked about at the beginning when we were first toasting. Riesling has really high natural levels of acid. And with that acid, it's going to skew the way that the sweetness is perceived by the human palate. So it's not reliable. Sometimes it's very accurate, the alcohol level or the residual sugar level. It'll tell you, but it's not always accurate. So what do? I want to remind you too, at this point, when we're talking about residual sugar, save some of your wine from each of the three samples today, because at the end of the tasting, this is where I'm going to have you revisit each of the three wines and challenge yourself. I want to see if you can identify the RS levels of each of these wines, and I'll help you along, but it'll be fun. Humor me. Okay, so if you can't use RS and you can't use the alcohol levels, what do? Well, with Riesling, there's actually an algorithm that you use and you input the values of three different things. The RS percentage, or it's grams per liter, if you're looking for something more specific. You also need the measurement for the total acidity. So wine has 5 natural types of acid, and you need to know the total acidity when you look at all 5 types within that Riesling sample. And the third value you need to put into the algorithm is the pH level, because each of those 5 acids, they have their own pH levels. So depending on how much you have, 1 or 3 or 5, it's going to change the pH level. And the pH level is going to change the perceived sweetness level. That seems like a lot of work to enjoy a glass of Riesling. So producers take care of it for you. In Germany, they have their own scale for identifying the quality and the sweetness level of their Rieslings. It's really precise, as is everything in German culture, but it's also a little bit difficult for us to follow if you're not within that world or you're not within that culture. I can't pronounce half of them, and I've been working within this industry for a while. So, what I'm going to focus on today is what most of Riesling producers use within the United States, which is the International Riesling Foundation scale. The algorithm is provided by the IRF to Riesling producers. The Riesling producers will take the values of the RS, the TA, and the pH, put them into their algorithm, and it'll tell them where on this scale their Riesling fits. And you'll find this scale on the back of about 30 million bottles around the US, Riesling bottles, and it's there to help guide the consumer. What can they expect when they purchase this bottle? What kind of tasting experience are they going to have? I heard someone ask a question or start to ask a question, so I'll take a minute. Okay, I'll keep going, but interrupt me if you want to. Uh, so I have a picture of what it looks like on the back of a label. This is one of our wines at Brooks, Ara. This is our celebrity wine, the Ara. I'll tell you more about that in a little bit, but Ara is consistently a dry wine. So you can see on the scale where that little marker ends up on the left-hand side under dry. So it's really helpful. It's very clear. Even if you can't read the words for whatever reason, the scale is a visual image to help show you what type of experience you're going to have. So without further ado, let's talk about the wine that you have in your glass right now. This is the 2019 Brooks Estate Riesling. You don't have the bottles in front of you, most of you at least. So for those who don't, this is the scale that's on the back of the bottle. It's a dry Riesling. So looking at the RS, the TA, and the pH levels, that algorithm tells us that the consumer is going to experience a dryness on the palate as far as sweetness levels go. When you're tasting the Brooks Estate, this is 100% Brooks Estate, so it's 100% biodynamic. I can answer questions about that if you'd like. I wonder too, I forgot to ask at the beginning if any of you were here for my biodynamic farming presentation. If you were, unmute yourself and let me know if you're in the room or online, I guess. Anyone? Well, if you have any questions about biodynamics, I'm happy to answer those later. But this one would fit within that classification and designation, Demeter Certified Biodynamic, both in the vineyard as well as in production at Brooks. It's a volcanic soil vineyard. Brooks Estate is primarily Nakaya volcanic soil, so it's lower in iron content than most of Willamette Valley, but it's still going to have incredible volcanic soil attributes. So the water is going to drain, but it's also going to stay absorbed within the soil. So the root structures can absorb moisture and water when they need it. So it's really great for dry farming. We don't need irrigation. You can have irrigation within Willamette Valley, but at Brooks, we choose not to. Part of it's because our soil really sustains that type of farming. The other part that I want to mention about volcanic soil and Riesling. Riesling is so indicative of its terroir in the environment in which it's grown. So with Riesling on volcanic soil, you tend to get a lot of citrus notes, both on the palate as well as the aroma. So as you're sipping, as you're smelling, I want you to think about some citrus fruits. I have some examples of at least one that's really dominant for me on the screen. But if you come up with some others, by all means, go with it. Wine tasting is a really personal experience, and whatever you taste is correct. So trust yourself. We all have different background experiences. We all had something different for lunch. So those experiences are going to change the way that you perceive the wine. So trust yourself. The other thing I wanted to share about this particular Riesling is that it's coming from old vines, planted in 1974. So these are, gosh, 40-year-old vines. Incredible to have some old vine Riesling. we love old vines at Brooks, especially because old vines, there's really no indication of what classifies as an old vine. I think most people within the industry, and you're welcome to challenge me, most people within the industry count 35 years and above as old vine. But the benefit to having an old vine vineyard is that your vines, they might be producing lower quantity of grapes, but the quality is very consistent. So year after year after year, those vines, they've been through it. They have survived the challenges, they've toughened up. Usually their root structure is very deep down within the ground. Ours go on our grafted vines about 20 feet, on our ungrafted self-rooted vines, 30 feet. So they can access that natural waterbed down below the top of the surface level whenever they want to. They don't care if a drought's going on. They don't care if a flood's going on. They're really resilient to temperature changes and wind changes. So lots of consistency. I do see a hand raised.
Um, I'm curious, and I'm not trying to like derail what you're saying, but like what volcano, how does Oregon, I used to live in Oregon, so I'm curious, where is there a volcano or how do you have volcanic soil?
Oh, I love that question. So, gosh, I have an image for this too, and I didn't put it in. Um, Forgive me, I'm going to use my hands. Willamette Valley is set between two different mountain ranges, first of all. So that's something just a good baseline information to know. 18 million years ago, Oregon was 8,000 feet under the ocean. So when the tectonic plates shifted, it lifted Oregon up and out of the ocean and created both of those mountain ranges on either end or either side of Willamette Valley. So you have the coastal range along the ocean, and then you have the Cascade Range that separates the coast from central Oregon. And when those ranges were formed, volcanoes all along the sides of these ranges went off and were filling the valley with lava. And as a general rule, you will find exceptions, but as a general rule, lava can't move that fast. So as it starts to flood through the valley and go up these hills and these ridges, it can't quite get over the ridge. So if you're a west facing slope in Willamette Valley, you're probably still marine sedimentary soil, so sediments from marine organisms when we were under the ocean. And if you're an east facing slope, you're probably covered in a blanket of lava. And that tends to be very true for Eola Amity Hills, which is where Brooks Estate is located. We are on an east facing slope, so we are volcanic soil. Our neighbors on west facing slopes are marine sedimentary. And then if you're looking for the nearest active volcano to us, it would be Mount St. Helens. And then there's Mount Hood too.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I just hosted a Willamette Valley Geological Soil Formation lecture for the International Food and Wine Society. So I've got all of this really fresh in my head. What are your impressions of the Brooks Estate Riesling? Was it what you expected? Did it surprise you? And if you don't like anything today, does not hurt my feelings. Wine is very personal.
I loved it.
Yay.
I like this one. It's what I would call a thinking wine. It's very surprising with the acidity, but then like it has some of that fruit and the residual sugar that balances the acidity. I really like it.
Excellent. This is a really good one for food pairing too. It does have some residual sugar, not a lot, but enough to where it makes that fruit pop. But then that acidity comes through and cleanses the palate. So anything that's going to be really high in fat content or salt is going to pair really well with this. And then as soon as you start adding in other elements that have a bit of fruit to them, even if it's lemon as the fruit, so chicken piccata, a summer salad with peaches and mozzarella. There are so many ways you can go with this to really emphasize what's going on. All right, more about Riesling. I already shared how Riesling expresses terroir very, very well. Very much a taste of place grape. So, if I'm not mistaken, Riesling is counted amongst the four most expressive taste of place grapes. So, we've got Riesling, Pinot Noir, Syrah, and Chardonnay. Those four tend to be chameleons based on where they're planted. So, really fun to taste those from different origins. If you have an opportunity to sit down and taste 3 to 4 bottles from completely different places with the same variety, it's a really fun experience. This is a map of where Riesling tends to grow the best. Riesling is fickle. Riesling prefers to grow in cooler climates. And that's why looking at the map, you'll notice each of these green zones are further and further away from the equator. So they're going to prefer something that's cold. And they can get pretty darn cold. Riesling is a really cold, hardy grape. It's also going to be one that buds late in the season, which is another reason that it prefers growing in cooler climates. So as the summertime comes later and later in the year, or at least the warmth, I should say, if you're looking at the southern hemisphere, when the warmth comes later and later in the year, that late budding nature of Riesling isn't a problem in cooler climates. That just fits naturally with the seasons. However, one of the problems with Riesling is it's very susceptible to botrytis and powdery mildew. So there are some considerations that need to be put in place when you're growing Riesling. Usually, you're going to want to be in a place where humidity is under control. So that tends to be something that Riesling growers need to think about. But other than that, it's hardy. Um, Looking at the map, of course, Germany. That's what we think of when we think of Riesling, and for good reason. Mosel Valley, or Mosel in particular, is just the king of Riesling. So it's really a place to learn from and experience and taste from when looking at the origins of such a perfected version of Riesling. And very close proximity, Austria, and then Alsace, France as well. And then we start looking into other regions. So the Finger Lakes in New York, New Zealand, of course, and Southern Australia, where it's starting to get cooler. You've got the wind coming in from the oceans, really great places to grow Riesling. And then we have a couple places in Canada and the other parts of the United States that are growing more and more beautiful Riesling. And Oregon's not even listed on this particular map, but Oregon is one of them. And that's why we're here today, because this is Oregon grown Riesling. So before we move forward, I invite you to unmute yourself. I want to know how many grape varieties you think are grown in the state of Oregon.
15.
15. Any others? Just Will for us today? All right.
100.
74. Sunny, you
Oh,
were so
I was
close.
gonna say 75. I was close.
Yes.
Is it 100?
This is so close.
Ah,
So
cheesy,
it's
kind of.
74. Of course, the royalty of Oregon, definitely Willamette Valley, is Pinot Noir with 57%. And in close proximity to that is Pinot Gris. Those are mutations of one another, hence the shared name Pinot. So they grow really well in the same environments. And when we're looking at Pinot Noir versus Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir is going to fetch a higher price point for several reasons. But when you're looking at a business metric and you're looking at return on investment, the Pinot Noir is going to take about the same amount of time to ferment as the Pinot Gris. But the Pinot Noir then needs to go into oak barrels for 10 to 20, 24 months before you can put that wine into bottle and start selling for money, for your business, livelihoods, for your family. So a lot of times growers and winemakers will have Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris grown or produced in the same environment so that they can bring the Pinot Gris straight from fermentation, 4 to 8 weeks, depending on your style, into bottles so you can start making money for your business and having money and revenue coming in, livelihood, I should say, for your family. So you can keep that going too. Right behind that is Chardonnay. And then you'll see the wee little green spot is going to be our Riesling. So not a lot of Riesling grown in Willamette Valley or Oregon as a whole, but not a lot grown in Willamette Valley either. Willamette Valley used to be a third Riesling, a third Pinot Gris, and a third Pinot Noir. And right around the end of World War II is when the wine industry started kicking up a notch in Oregon, and Riesling was ripped out. Pinot Noir was planted instead. So what we like to do at Brooks is try to revitalize the reputation of Riesling. At Brooks, we follow very much old world style. So we're influenced by German winemaking, Austrian, Alsatian. We love it when the acidity is crisp and refreshing, literally mouth-watering. We love it when the aromatics on the nose are so expressive. And we follow a very different range of sweetness levels. We produce extra brut, sparkling Riesling in the traditional champagne method. So following the German Sekt style. And then we produce all the way through with our still to sweet as well as dessert style. So ice wine fermented, or yes, ice wine style dessert Riesling. So we cover it all. And the reason I'm mentioning this is for you to know, you're all over the country. Brooks is the top producer of single vineyard Riesling in the entire country. So for example, what you're tasting right now, the 2019 vintage of the estate Riesling, that year we produced 22 different Rieslings. And then the last label that you have today, the 22 Sweet Pea, in 2022, we made 14 different Rieslings. So we're starting to scale it back, but as you can tell, 14 different Rieslings is still 13 to 14 more than most producers are making. So many to choose from, and being from single vineyards, which all of your wines today are, it really helps us nail that taste of place and identify what it is that's making Riesling taste different from site to site. And with that, because we're the top producer of single vineyard Riesling, wine buyers know us. When they're buying wine, especially for high profile dinners, and they need a Riesling, we're top of their mind. And this was definitely true in 2009. We had the wine buyer for the White House contact us. They wanted a Riesling for President Obama's first state dinner with the Prime Minister of India. And we were more than pleased to provide that wine. So one of the Brooks Rieslings, the Ara, I mentioned our celebrity wine, that was poured in the White House in 2009. Let's move to the second wine, reminding you to keep a little bit in your glass because we're going to revisit all three at the end. So this second wine is the same vintage, 2019, but we're switching vineyard locations. This is the La Chenaie vineyard site. We're also going to be switching the sweetness level, the perceived sweetness level, just a little bit. So we're moving to medium dry now. A lot of times people will talk about off dry, but following the IRF scale, we're going to use the terminology medium dry. This location is right around the corner from Brooks Estate. It's in the exact same AVA, Eola Amity Hills, and we're not a big AVA. Planted earlier. So these are only 20-year-old vines as opposed to 40. But it's also volcanic soil, which makes it a really great comparison against Brooks Estate. The volcanic soil here is the Jory soil predominantly, so it has a higher iron content, and it will affect the flavor of the grapes as they're developing in their aroma and their tannin structure in their skins as well, but not as much as do other factors. So for this one, the sweetness level is really what we're going to hone in on. And then it's also at a lower elevation. So it's going to be a little bit warmer as it's ripening and maturing before harvest. So with that, the fruit's a little bit more developed than the Brooks Estate fruit at harvest. So with this one, as you're tasting through, that apple is going to come through really clean and crisp. For me, I get some zestiness, which I attribute to the likes of ginger root, fresh ginger root, but I'm also going to start getting some stone fruit. So anything with a pit in it is what I refer to as a stone fruit. So in this situation, it would be nectarines. It's tangy, fruity, crisp, tart, juicy. What do you think? Ooh, I see Phoenix is toasting. Do you notice the sweetness level change? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
You still notice the acidity under your tongue. It's still there, but it's different. Mhm. And so, what I like to point out as we move from a dry to a medium dry is we didn't move that far on the scale yet. And just that tiny little bump, as humans, we're most receptive to the tastes of bitter and sweet. And these are both biological responses, at least scientists believe they are. They believe that bitterness, the tiniest amount we can detect as a natural reaction to help us avoid toxic substances in nature so we don't eat something poisonous accidentally. And on the flip side, they believe that we can identify the tiniest amounts of sweetness in our food to encourage us to find caloric dense, nutrient dense foods like carrots and beets, for example. So even though we've just hopped a little bit on that scale, we can taste it very, very quickly, the difference. For this wine, anything that's medium dry, I love pairing it with foods that are spicy. And because of the zestiness, think a classic pairing. For those of you that are deep within the wine world, you know this pairing already. But Riesling, especially medium dry Riesling, with Thai food is a match made in heaven. It's something about the fat in the peanut butter and the coconut milk with all the different aromatic herbs and spices, the lemongrass, the cilantro, the lime. It just ties everything together. So if you are, keep this in mind the next time you have Thai food and grab a medium dry Brooks Riesling. Any other comments on the La Chenet or questions about anything so far? All right. Keep sipping. And while you do, I'm going to tell you the story of Brooks. It's important to know where we came from to know who we are. This is a picture of Jimmy Brooks. He founded the Brooks label in 1998, and that's his son, Pascal Brooks. Jimmy was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, went to school here, and when he graduated, he didn't know what he wanted to do. So he bought a one-way ticket to Europe and thought he would just work odd jobs and travel with money, and then work another odd job and travel some more. Well, the first odd job was working for a harvest in Beaujolais, France, at a biodynamic vineyard, and he fell in love with winemaking. He continued to travel and work odd jobs for 6 years all throughout Europe, but he came back to that same vineyard for each of those 6 harvests to continue to learn about biodynamic vineyard management and winemaking. And throughout those 6 years, that's when he met his wife in Poland. They had little Pascal, and then they decided to move the family back to the States and bring all that French winemaking knowledge to Willamette Valley. Jimmy became the head winemaker at Willackenzie. If any of you are familiar with that winemaking producer, I highly recommend you check them out as well. But Jimmy was their head winemaker, and they let him start making Brooks wine on the side using their equipment. It's a very typical Oregon story, so collaborative and supportive. That was wonderful. But after about a year or so, Jimmy moved to another winery called Mace Syrah, which I also highly recommend because they let him start making more Brooks on the side using their equipment. And the whole time, because this was a side project, Jimmy was making very informal handshake agreements with farmers to buy the fruit for his side project. That was fine. He did that for 6 years. But then 2004, it was 2 months after this picture was taken and 2 weeks before harvest, Jimmy was found in his kitchen. He had had an aortic aneurysm and died. He was 38 years old. And that day created two really intense situations. On one side, we had the farmers. It was 2 weeks before harvest. There was nothing contractual to solidify their livelihood, and they were grieving the loss of a friend. And on the other side, we had the family. 8-year-old Pascal that day became the youngest winery owner in the world at the time. And his mother really just wanted to focus on being a single mother, and I don't blame her. So Jimmy's sister, Janie, when she got the phone call, she hopped on a plane, flew to Oregon, and when she got to Jimmy's house, there were a bunch of people outside waiting for her. Turns out they were winemakers from our community who wanted her to know how much they loved Jimmy. And they wanted to figure out a way to make this keep going because Jimmy had made it very clear this was the only thing he had to pass on to Pascal. So, with Janie and her husband David, with their help, they were able to put together a financial fund so the farmers were taken care of. They had their money for their business and their families so they could keep up on 2 feet. The 12 winemakers that had showed up that night, they took the grapes back to their 12 wineries, fermented and bottled our wine for us that year, and it gave Janie enough time to learn the wine industry. All she knew about wine was that she liked to drink it. So here we are now. Last year was our 25th anniversary. Janie Brooks Hoyk is in the center. She still runs the company, but Pascal Brooks is the one and only owner of Brooks Wine to this day. He is now 27. He is so much like his dad, really well read, very well written. He is an award-winning article writer. He's so humble. You would never know that he owns a winery. And he's living in France, just like his dad did in his 20s. I thought it was the French girlfriend at first, but now I kind of think he's just carved out a niche for himself. He's been there for 5 years. He manages a very large oak grove for a location right outside of Paris and loves it. So I don't know when he's coming back and in what capacity, but I'm very happy to know him. And then on the other side, we have Chris Williams, our head winemaker, up until last month. 2 months ago. He just retired. So Chris was Jimmy's assistant winemaker, which was a perfect fit because he knew what Jimmy liked and what Jimmy didn't like. So we've been able to stay true to Jimmy the whole time. I mentioned 2 months ago that all changed. Right at the beginning of Women's History Month, we named Claire Jarreau our head winemaker. So Claire has been with the company for 9+ years, all in winemaking. So she's been learning under the apprenticeship of Chris, and she now runs our winemaking department. So Brooks is now, I would say, 85% women-led, which is great for a company that's only 30 employees. So pretty proud of that. I tell the story very intentionally because we try to keep gratitude at the forefront of everything we do. We know that we wouldn't be here without the support of our community. So by welcoming me into your homes tonight to share our wine and our story, this is really what helps us keep going with the extended community. So thank you for letting me be with you. This is a picture from Brooks Estate or of Brooks Estate. This is our vineyard. We're at 750 feet overlooking the valley beneath us. Great for lifting us up and out of the fog, as you can see that blanket of fog down beneath on the valley floor. And then we overlook a 180-degree view of the Cascade Range. So we get Mount St. Helens, we get Mount Hood, we get Mount Adams, Jefferson, and sometimes we get the Sisters. So if you're familiar with Oregon mountain formations, it's an incredible view on a clear day. Beautiful, green, welcoming, inviting, and bountiful. If you ever come out to Willamette Valley, please come visit us. We have a deck that overlooks this whole view while you taste and sip and nibble on food pairings from our kitchen. Time for the last wine. So put that third wine in your glass. If you notice on the IRF scale, we're going to kick it up a couple notches now with sweetness. This is 2022 Sweet Pea. Sweet Pea was Pascal's nickname when he was a kid, and now he doesn't really care for it, so we don't call him that anymore. But now we call him Paco. I don't know where that came from either, but Sweet Pea was his nickname. He got to choose the color of the label, and so that's his little stamp from when he was a kid. This is also a wine that was made when Jimmy was still with us, and that's why it's named after Pascal. We're going back to Brooks Estate this time. So exactly the same grapes that you tasted in wine number one. They are a different vintage, but they are the same grapes. So this is a great way to taste how different the same grapes can express, how they can express themselves in a wine when fermentation is stopped earlier or allowed to go further along in the process. So this one is stopped quite a bit earlier to fall within the range of perceived sweetness, but everything else is going to be the same. Fermented in stainless steel, just like Brooks Estate, just like the La Chenet. So we have a lot of that malic acid still present. So you've got that Granny Smith apple is still going to be there. It's definitely fruity, and the extra sugar, the residual sugar, is going to help make all of those fruit flavors pop. So both on the nose, you'll notice it, but when you taste it, that extra residual sugar is going to make it be super juicy. There's going to be some floral components to it, as there was with the La Chenet, and some tanginess. I still love the balance of the acid. It's still tangy. I also want you to pick up, can you identify some of the, what we call the beeswax? It's kind of musty or earthy, whichever word you prefer to use to describe it. I'm curious if you're picking up on it, and if you're picking up on something different, let me know. The other item that we've not talked about yet is the aroma that is a dead ringer for Riesling. Anyone know what aroma I'm talking about?
Petrol.
Petrol. Riesling smells like gasoline, like petroleum. So now that I've said that to you, if you've not experienced that before, stick your nose in each of the three wines and see if you can pick up on it. The thing about the petrol smell, the aroma, is that we still don't know where it comes from. When you get a bunch of Riesling growers, enthusiasts, winemakers, buyers, chef, it doesn't matter. When you get them all together, scientists for that matter, there's still no consensus on where the petroleum comes from. And it's not consistent with every vineyard and every production winery. So some people believe it's how hard you're pressing the grapes. Some people believe it is impacted by precipitation levels and temperature during the growing season. Other people believe it's terroir. There are all these, and then clones play a hypothesis, at least. They present a hypothesis to the situation, but there's still no general consensus or data to prove where it comes from. So just a fun tidbit, the next time you are sipping on a Riesling, stick your nose in the glass and see if you can pick up on petrol. If you don't notice the gasoline smell, see if I put the word Sharpie, like the permanent marker, see if you can pick up on that. That tends to help people guide them to it as well. All right. This is what I wanted to do side by side, where you have wine left over from each of the three wines. What I'm going to do is give you the RS, TA, and pH of the wines, at least the first one. That first wine that you had, the residual sugar was 4.58 grams per liter, pH 2.97, TA 9.1, and alcohol 14%. Just for the sake of games, even though I told you it doesn't really matter, I want to see if you can guess what the residual sugar is in that second wine that we had today, the 2019 La Chenet.
5.6.
5.6. That's like one guess. Any other guesses?
7.
Maybe a 7,
6.
a 6. All right, I've got 3. Here we go. Are you ready? 14.2.
I would have lost at the Price is Right.
Jesus.
So it's a bit more when we're going up the scale. pH is really similar. Total acidity is actually down, and alcohol is down. So that fits the generalization that we think of when we're looking at sweet wines. Okay, the last one. So now you have an idea going from dry to medium dry. It was a 10 grams per liter increase. Taste that sweet pea again. Let's play the game. Price is Right style. What do you think the residual sugar is in the sweet pea?
36.
36, says Paul.
28.
28, says Will.
32.
32, says Sunny. All right. Anyone else?
35.
35, Vanessa.
30.
And
30,
Mike said
Danny.
25.
Here we go.
Look at Dorothy.
63.
Oh, 63.
63. 63. I want to point out 2 things here with the sweet pea. One, notice that the total acidity is the highest out of the 3. So when you're tasting that pea, the sweet pea, it's tangy. Even though it's sweet, it still has a balance of acidity, and it's not added acid. It's in winemaking, it's becoming more and more common in New World, at least, to add powdered citric acid or powdered tartaric acid to your wine to adjust the body of the wine, to make it more crisp, sometimes to adjust the flavor. That's not a bad thing at all. It's just different than what Brooks does. At Brooks, we don't add sugar, we don't add acid. We try not to add anything unless we absolutely have to contain microbial growth. That's part of biodynamic winemaking as well. We're not stripping anything out. We're not adding anything in. So that total acidity is natural. The other thing I want to point out with the sweet pea is you notice the alcohol percentage is lower. So that fits that misconception that I was warning you about. So all these 3 are calling me a liar, essentially. So what I decided to do was to give you one more example to prove that you can't trust alcohol and residual sugar every time when you're working with Riesling. So I don't have it for you to taste, but we also make a dessert wine in an iced wine style called the Tethys. This is going to be in the sweet range, but now it's an official dessert Riesling. What do you think the sugar level is going to be on the Tethys?
180.
180.
Diabetic. Kool-Aid.
Here we go. Ooh, not too bad, Will. Not too bad. 118. So we're jumping
180.
a lot in residual sugar for the dessert style Riesling, but look at the alcohol level. It's exactly the same as the sweet pea. So this is why I wanted you to just be aware. When people are relying solely upon the alcohol level on the back of a Riesling bottle, it's a guide to the tasting experience, but it's not going to be the holy grail. It's not always going to lead you accurately. So just keep that in mind and look for the IRF scale. All right, I saw a couple people taking screenshots, so take it again if you need it, because I'm going to move to another screen. In 3, 2, 1. All right, I told you the story of how we came to be, but I want to quickly end on who we are now. So Brooks is the only winery in the world for now to have all 5 of these commitments. We are a certified B Corporation. B corporations are about putting people and planet ahead of profit. And we're audited extremely intensely on this every 3 years. We're also a member of 1% for the Planet. 1% for the Planet members donate 1% of their revenue, so not their net margin. This is upfront sales. 1% is donated to a nonprofit that focuses on environmental wellness. So we give our 1% to Kiss the Ground. They're in LA. They study regenerative agriculture and teach about regenerative agriculture. There's actually a documentary on Netflix called Kiss the Ground, if any of you are curious in learning more about them. And they just released a second documentary called Common Ground, which I've not watched yet, but I've heard it's great. So that's our 1% for the Planet partner. We're also, I mentioned multiple times, Demeter certified biodynamic, which is why we partnered with Kiss the Ground. They study regenerative agriculture, and we essentially practice it with biodynamic vineyard management. There are differences between the two, but they do go hand in hand with soil health and advocacy. So that's why we chose them. We're a partner with Ecology. Ecology funds climate change projects all over the world. So what we do with Ecology is every time we bring in $50 worth of revenue, we donate money to have a tree planted somewhere where it's going to really impact either the aquatic life on the globe or the air, of course. So since we've joined Ecology, it's been a year and a half now. We've planted over 60,000 trees. So the next time you find a bottle of Brooks in your grocery store or on a menu in a restaurant, please feel confident purchasing that because you're making the world just a little bit better when you do. And last but not least, we are officially 100% carbon neutral for a company because our website is now carbon neutral as well through Earth First e-commerce. If you visit the Brooks website, something I want you to notice is how much white space there is behind all the images. And there's not going to be a lot of images. It might take you a little bit longer to load some of our pages. All of these different examples are things that help limit how much storage we need to have up in the cloud and how much energy you need to upload our website to your phone or to your laptop. Apparently, all those things matter. I didn't know. Now you know too. With all of those things that we're doing, we're still very much committed to excellence, and the world is definitely taking notice. I'm going to brag as I leave our tasting tonight. In 2019, Wine and Spirits named us one of their top 100 wineries in the world. And the big thing about this is the Wine and Spirits Top 100 Awards are blind competitions. So the judges don't know who produced the wine when they're tasting it. So it's a really huge honor. And in Wine and Spirits in 2019, to give you an idea of the 100, 32 of those wineries were in the United States. 19 of them were in Oregon. 9 of them were in Willamette Valley. And 6 of them were in Eola Amity Hills. Do you remember where Brooks Estate is located? Eola Amity Hills. So really great things are coming out of Eola Amity Hills, and you all need to take a field trip to come and see me. And then they gave it to us again in 2021. And then they gave it to us again last year. So we're doing things responsibly. We're doing things well with respect to tradition, and we're doing them beautifully. They taste yummy. Our portfolio is 60 different wines. Most of those are single vineyard Pinot Noir, followed closely by the single vineyard Rieslings. And we also work with aromatic whites like Gewürztraminer, which we ferment dry, Muscat, which we ferment dry. We also work with Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, dry and dry. We like our dry. And we also started working with a couple bolder varietals under Chris's winemaking. So Petit Syrah, Syrah, Tempranillo. So I'm not sure if Claire's going to continue that program or not, but she might come up with her own. So it's excited to see. If you do want to explore some of the Brooks portfolio, visit our website. There is a special Hue Society only coupon. So Hue Society 10 to get 10% off. If you need any recommendations, I'm happy to provide those. April at brookswine.com. That's me. I'm the Director of Business Development and Education. I've been with the company for 6 years, so I know all the wines. I can make recommendations. If you're looking for a new wine club, look no further. Brooks has plenty of perks and options, and we've got 3 different clubs to choose from. The 12 bottle club, you can customize those shipments, and they're only twice a year. Any questions?
Actually, quick question. Do you have distribution?
We
On the
do. We're distributed in, I want to say 32 of the states. And we we ship DTC to 45 of them. And then international distribution, we're also in the UK and Japan. We still have some inventory in Canada and Mexico, but I don't see us renewing those.
Cool. I'm going to email you.
Yes, please do. Yes, Shay, thanks for that reminder. Please do tag us if you are posting to social media. I would love to show my director of marketing that I did well.
We did.
Thank you.
We're at the Wine Collective in Scottsdale. They're hosting us.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be oh, you're going to have a great time.
And the owner's here too, Miss Sonia.
Hi.
She's a Hue affiliate.
Oh, fantastic.
And Nellie's a Roots recipient.
Hi. I hope you all have so much fun. And I love
She's had your
Scottsdale.
wines before.
Oh, has she? Wonderful. You're in such a great place too. I grew up in Tucson. So I know the area.
Yeah, come back. Meet the maker.
Well, if you have any questions, I'm happy to stay on longer. If not, that's all I have for you today. Like I said, yeah, thank you for joining me, but I'll stay on as long as you have any questions and we'll go with it.
What's your favorite wine from you guys' portfolio?
So I'm a seasonal drinker. I change what I grab based on the temperature and what I'm drinking and what I'm eating. So right now, we're starting to make a very quick shift into warm weather here in Oregon. And so I'm grabbing for the whites. And what I'm drinking my most favorite right now, we have a Riesling. It's a dry Riesling. Oh, I have 2 Rieslings that I really like. The 2018 Lone Star Riesling is a dry Riesling that I absolutely love. And then any of the vintages of the Bois Joli Riesling, which is a medium dry, consistently one of my favorites.
Hey,
And then if you're looking for the Pinot side, the 2021 Rostaban Pinot Noir is beautiful. It also just was awarded or named 98 points from James Suckling. So exceptional wine.
all right. I'm sorry, which one was that? Which vintage was that?
The Rostaban. I recommend the 2021 vintage. Actually, we sell out so often the other vintages might not even be available. But the 2021 Rostaban.
Oh, I see it. I see a 2019 and
The
okay.
19 is really nice too. The 21 just is juicier.
All right. Well, I found it. Okay.
There is a question in the chat about
Yeah.
is Georgia currently only direct to consumer, specifically Atlanta?
Oh, yes. This is from Billy. I was just talking to Billy last night and today. Yes, Billy. So we pulled our contract with Winebow in Georgia. So give us 2 to 3 months. We're working with another distributor right now, and we'll be back online in Atlanta soon. Distributed in Atlanta soon. I'm pulling up the chat so I can help. Anything else? I see one of the questions, Alicia, if you're still here, you asked for the names. Which names were you looking for?
I'm not sure if she's still here, but she was looking for the names.
Wineries we were talking about.
Oh, okay. Yep. Willa Kenzie and May Sarah. Beautiful. And May Sarah has an exceptional story as well. They fled war-torn Iran on the back of a motorcycle while she was pregnant and rebuilt their whole life here. So just awesome. The Pinot Meunier. Willie Kenzie produces excellent wine. DC, Monique, distributor in DC. Honestly, I feel like that was one with Wine Boat as well. So give us some time. Our goal is to be in all 45 that we ship DTC to. If you go to our website, you can verify whether I'm correct or wrong, but we have a distributor page that tells you where we are in each of the states currently, and it is up to date. So that might be a good place to check to help me out because I don't know off the top of my head. Any questions about Riesling that I didn't answer that you were hoping I did? All right. Well, Shay, do you have anything to add?
No, I think this was great. I
Right.
think that I'll be happy when I get to taste your wines, but
Yeah, you too. And
it's
all
been
the
great
people in
seeing you.
Atlanta, we had some trouble getting their wine to them. So they're going to get a special private tasting in 2 weeks.
Lucky them.
All right, everyone.
Like,
Have a great evening.
thank
Good
you
night.
so
Good.
much.
Bye.
Bye.